Just a little update here. Both players have already resolved mulligans, and Steve is on a mull to 3.
Oof.
Not a
Gross.
great way to start your tournament. But Joe is on a mull to 5. And I think Steve was on the play, and he didn't have a land to play.
Okay.
So a little rough one.
All right.
Players did have access to archetypes,
Yes.
not deck lists, at the start of this round. So that probably influenced the mulligan decisions there.
Yeah.
And then after our pod Swiss, which would be after round 5, we will give all players deck lists. And once we give all of the players deck lists, we'll give you guys the deck lists as well.
Yeah, I think it makes sense a lot in something like this where it's so small. It's 24 players. You're really at a disadvantage if you're like these guys in round 1, where the other 22. That's my math for the day. Where it's early, but we're doing math.
Yeah.
The other 22 players could figure out what you're playing right away. So in order to level the playing field to a certain extent, we share all the archetypes. That way, players aren't caught off guard or punished for being on camera. So Joe's going to lead off with a ponder, and he's doing pretty well here. Steve, I think, has a lotus petal, but not a lot going on.
And I think like game 1, this is kind of fine, honestly. Like black red can win on a mull to 4 if it. But it is going to be a little hard.
Yeah, Joe.
This many turns.
Yeah, I just saw
without
Joe.
doing anything.
Joe picked up a second copy of Force of Will now. He also has Hymn to Torok in hand, which is very good here. When your opponent's just has so few cards, so Joe's in the driver's seat here. Just needs to find a way to win. Essentially, I think he has a Snapcaster Mage on top of it.
Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty good way to start.
Yeah.
See what I do see an unmask, I think, from Steve's side.
Okay. Joe missed a land. Steve continuing to miss lands. That's kind of the nature of the beast in these mulligans. No, Joe missing another land drop here.
And Steve might get to the point where he's just like, move to discard.
And he has an Emrakul in hand, or excuse me, a Gristlebrand in hand, and I think it's a Chancellor. Yeah. Joe thinking about playing the Snapcaster Mage here, I think, and just getting a clock. I like this a lot, honestly.
Well, and he's pretty far away from like Snap Hymning. Not that I think him is at its best in this format. But
a third copy of Force Will for Joe.
It was also really kind of fortunate he played the Snapcaster because he missed another land, and he probably would have had to discard at that point.
Sure did. All right, Joe going to go for Hymn to Torok. Steve probably okay with this.
Probably. I mean,
7
roll
cards.
Some dice, maybe get my Chancellor or my Gristlebrand into the graveyard.
7 cards not doing much right now. I'm pretty sure Joe has 3 copies of Force Will here, which is pretty good, believe it or not, against the Reanimator deck.
It depends on how many other blue cards he has to. All right. And one fatty did go into the bin.
Yep. Oh, Steve finds a land. There's a Chancellor and a Lotus Petal where the discard's there.
Losing one of his mana sources definitely hurts, though, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. I thought he might have had an Exhume there in hand. He does have a Reanimate. He does have an Exhume as well. So Steve has a lot of ways to continue just firing off into Joe. Even though Joe does have these 3 copies of Force, he's got 3 copies of Force, right? There's only so much he can do post that happening.
So he has 6 cards in hand, right? So like one of these, unless it's 6 blue cards, he can't play all 3 Forces.
Exactly. It was part of the reason to play that Hymn to Torok there, which was pretty good. It's probably not getting much better at this point in the game. So
yeah.
And Joe's missing on lands. So Steve's kind of figuring out if he wants to go for it here, and yeah, he sure does. Trying to reanimate the Chancellor, and Joe force pitching Force. So you know what that must mean he doesn't have another blue card.
Right. Well, the first
Force
one's
is really good.
kind of free though. Like the first one almost has to pitch to another Force. I think. There just aren't that many blue cards.
Wow, there we go. Gurmag Angler. That's a pretty good clock. Now, Joe picked up a Diabolic Edict, which is actually pretty good here as well. I think if Steve has a land, he's probably just firing the cannon again. It's unfortunate he has Cabal Therapy. He could have checked for Force of Will early there when he would have been really rewarded.
Yeah.
So, let's see what Steve gets to. As far as in this deck list, most of the Grixis control decks, I see a question in the chat about playing Wasteland. They don't. They're super.
Really hard on the mana.
It's really tough on the mana. Yeah, they have double black cards.
They might have played it. I've seen like 1 or 2 copies back when Deathrite was legal, but
well, Deathrite Shaman's basically the best 1 mana planeswalker of all time.
But since then, I think the mana is a little too rough.
Yeah, so no copies of nothing for Steve to worry about playing out this Badlands. So. Let's see what Steve comes to here.
Steve's a very deliberate player. He's gonna really think through his lines. He really uses the round clock to the best of his ability.
Yeah, and with 55-minute rounds, we give players a little bit of extra time. Obviously, we want the best play possible, and Steve's going to get that third Force Wheel out of Joe's hand.
And the rest of the cards in Joe's hand are not good. Other than this edict, the push and the K command, just they're not sitting pretty. He needs a third land to turn on the K command.
Yeah, the thing is here is, Steve's under a two-turn clock almost here. If Joe hits a land, he's going to attack for 7 here, put him to 9,
Yep.
and then that Culligan's command is the 2 missing points. And he has a Diabolic Edict to clean up if Steve is fortunate enough to put a creature in play here. And he hits an Exhume again, I think. I think Steve is just short on mana. Let's see here.
See if he has another discard spell.
Unless that could have been. I'm not sure if that was a Dark Ritual that Steve picked up. I'm not sure the art in that first card in his hand. If he has
it's a ritual.
If he has a Dark Ritual, he can go off here a little bit. Nope.
I think he realizes I need a Gristlebrand in play.
He has a Gristlebrand in his hand. Yeah, he just
Right.
has no way to pitch it here. So puts him down to 2. And Joe's still missing a land for the Skulligan's command. Is it Entomb?
And there's what all can give it haste.
So nothing, but he could go get something like Sire of Insanity won't do it. I think he just needs to put a Gristlebrand into the...
I think you're right, buddy. I think he also needs a way to discard this.
Ashen Rider's also a card.
Ashen Riders.
I think he has one. Steve
well, he's
has
at
one.
2, right? So he would need... Okay, I mean, that's a good decision.
Yeah, Ashen Rider... Ashen Rider's a pretty good card there, so... It's one we don't see a ton of. Seeing a bunch of... because we don't see it a bunch in Legacy. Reanimator's kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit here. But this card does a ton of things, so we'll bring that one up here on the screen for you. So you can see Ashen Rider has a mana cost that's essentially infinite in these kind of decks. It costs 8, but it's flying 5/5. When it enters the battlefield or dies, it exiles a permanent. So it's a 2-for-1 a lot of times.
Yeah, a lot of times, yep.
So Joe is going to go ahead and pick up game number 1 here over Steve Locke. So a little unfortunate for Steve to mulligan down so far there. But I wouldn't be surprised, Steve figured out here post-board. I think, though, it does get a little bit better for Joe post-board. I'll run you through Steve's sideboard here. So Steve has 3 Assassin's Trophies, an Elish Norn, an Iona, 4 Reverent Silence, 2 Thoughtseize, 2 Cryptbreaker, an Archetype of Endurance, and a Grave Titan. Most of these cards are okay. I do like the Cryptbreaker we've mentioned before.
Yeah, I like that too.
Yeah, it's a way to get around, to try and get around Surgical Extraction. You can assume that some of these decks are boarding out their Fatal Pushes and things like that, which are kind of nonsense. So it's a decent way to get rid of...
It also looks good in the face of Diabolic Edict, unless it's exactly just to answer the Cryptbreaker.
Sure.
A lot of the low targeted removals coming out. So I think it's definitely a card that Steve's looking to board in here.
Okay. Yeah, I like his sideboard choices. I assume the Thoughtseizes and the Cryptbreakers are going to come in. I like Grave Titan. I don't know if I like it better than something like Tidespot Tyrant and Ashen Rider are kind of the ones where you cut some number of them.
Right.
And maybe you bring in these instead. I'm not sure what he'll bring in here, but definitely the Cryptbreakers and the Thoughtseizes seem pretty great. So how about you for Joe?
Yeah, on Joe's side, our sideboard looks like a Flusterstorm, a Hydroblast, a Nile Spellbomb, a Pithing Needle, 2 Pyroblasts, a Rel Elemental Blast, 2 Surgicals, a Marsh Casualties, 2 Blood Moon, a Liliana the Last Hope, and a Toxic Deluge.
Wow, 2 Blood Moons in this board. That's crazy.
2 Blood Moon, yeah. So looking at this, I mean, the easy includes are Surgical Extraction, for sure. Pithing Needle, if you want to name Gristlebrand.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely good enough. And then the Nile Spellbomb also being more graveyard hate.
Yeah, definitely. I've played a lot of this Grixis control deck in Legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, you just want to remove things like the Liliana the Last Hope's not particularly good. Obviously, the Fatal Pushes and Lightning Bolts also are not great. So you want to bring in Flusterstorm is another card you're considering. Culligan's Command is another one that's just kind of not very good. Yeah, so you want to bring in all these the cheaper, more efficient counter spells. Surgicals are obviously very good. He just gets to trim on some of the nonsense cards. Even in that game, we saw Joe's hand his leftovers were the Fatal Push and the Culligan's Command weren't going to do anything, but he still won anyways, and you get to remove those cards post-board. So I think Joe is certainly advantaged in the post-board games, but if anyone's going to figure it out, I think Steve's definitely got a shot here.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we get to play some more Magic than we saw in Game 1, but, I think Steve played to his outs, getting the Ashen Rider, hoping to hit a second land.
Yeah.
And I just didn't get there.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of like the nature of some of these combo decks in Legacy is you don't fold to Force of Will, but Force of Will is really good against you because you have to go off one time, and Steve would have had to go off multiple times in a row to get around Joe, like 3 times in a row to get around the triple Force of Will. So
right.
That card's very good, and it allows you to tap out for something like him to Torok, and to just put him on the front foot, and he played the Snapcaster early and just had a small clock. I think Gurmag Angler really just shuts the door.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's definitely one of those threats, I think, in the Grixis control deck that they really want to see in this matchup so that you can play the 1-mana 5/5 and have open a counterspell.
Yeah, that's the big thing is we talked about boarding into the cheaper removal, the cheaper counterspells, the more efficient counterspells. You fill up your graveyard really fast, especially with the fetch lands, and then you just stick this 5/5 and you try and just get the game over with as quick as possible.
I think Steve's really looking for those compulsive therapies, at least in the early turns. Name the problem cards like Force of Will. Really force Joe into a back foot on what to do. Typically, you just want to let it resolve because you don't want to 2-for-1 yourself anyway.
Yeah, I actually didn't think about the kind of utility that something like Cabal Therapy has with Crypt Breaker, which is kind of cool. It's like it does the Young Pyromancer impression, kind of.
Exactly, yep.
Not quite as good as Young Pyromancer Cabal Therapy,
not
but
quite,
it definitely has some.
But when you're wanting to put things into the graveyard anyway, it's pretty good value.
Yeah, not bad. All right, so he's just going to shuffle up for game number 2 here of our first round. Man, I'm super excited. Obviously, again, we got Legacy for these first 2 rounds.
This whole tournament, I'm excited for.
It's wild.
Yeah,
it has been a ride to get here.
And if you want to find out more information on this tournament, head on over to nerdragegaming.com. We have a whole article up about the series and the championship and what's coming next year. Facebook group, tons of info. We're gonna have all of the player profile slides up by the end of the day on our Facebook. So yeah, check it out. It'll be sweet.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes in these kind of tournaments as far as promoting the players and getting a bunch of production work done. So a lot of cool stuff we got to share with you, as Brad said here. Let's see. Is that Chancellor of the Annex in Steve's opener?
It does look like it.
That card is so annoying to play against, just for the record.
Yep. I see a looting. I see 2 lands, I think. One of being a fetch. I think this is a fairly good hand from Steve.
Okay. Yeah, he's got to reanimate. As long as he has a way to get something into the bin, Steve's hand's really good. And you said he had a Faithless Looting, so. This Chancellor,
Yep.
I am so annoyed by Chancellor of the Annex, man. I can't even
It's a great
explain.
way to beat the force.
Yep.
On turn 1.
All right, let's see where we go here. So Steve, gonna lead us off here.
I think he's trying to decide how much he wants to invest on turn 1. Got this Faithless Looting.
Yep.
I'm certain that we're going to see that cast. Would be my guess.
Yeah, it's tough. It's pretty tough. A Chancellor in the opener is arguably Steve's best card in his opening hand. It does a nice. It helps you get around the first counterspell, basically.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, now that Probe is banned, there aren't many free spells that you were just casting to negate it.
Yep, you're 100% right. So Steve looking like he's thumbing this Faithless Looting to the front of his hand here. He's going to go for that. Going to draw a couple cards here. Now, for this, what are you scared of here? Are you scared of Surgical Extraction exactly at this point?
I certainly, it would be on my mind, but I'm not going to play around it.
I don't think so. I think this is what we're doing.
If he's got it, he's got it.
Yep.
He's taking your Chancellor right now, so it's not the worst creature he could take.
Yeah, Steve actually has an Entomb in his hand.
And no turn 1 Ponder or anything to get around that counter.
Yeah, I think he's got.
The Chancellor.
He's got a. Is that a Daze? I can't tell what that card is in Joe's hand. I don't know. He's not playing Daze. I think that might be a Flusterstorm there.
So I think we'll see. Yeah, Thoughtseize.
Good lead. I like this from Steve. He's going to force some action from Joe.
Probably see Man, I don't know what we're going to see here.
I don't know. We're going to find out, though. Unless he has a Brainstorm to hide some things.
It's not a Daze.
No.
It certainly looks like a Daze.
It does, yeah. There's a lot of new art with the UMA and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I looked, I know you guys...
It's really sad, dude. It's really hard as coverage to keep up with all the artwork.
Please stop printing such beautiful cards.
Yeah.
I know you guys, yesterday, when we were doing stuff, you guys were doing an Ultimate Masters draft. I looked over, there's an Eternal Witness on the field, and I was like, what is going on? What is that card? Just beautiful art, so...
Okay, so he did have the Surgical.
Yep.
That was a good call. Looks like he's paying the 1.
Yep. Gonna go for the Surgical here, so... Now, Steve has an Entomb in hand, so not all is lost. He can kind of load back up. It's going to take some effort, though. So Steve shows the grip.
So we see Cabal Therapy, Entomb
and Reanimate, and then there's 2 lands. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
So now Steve is digging towards another. He's got everything really at this point.
Yeah, he can get Gristlebrand next turn, right?
Yep.
So now this Thoughtseize, if it clears the way, Joe's going to be on a
1 card. Yeah. Yep. So good stuff here from both guys. I expect no less. So Joe's just making sure. I want to see what you're doing. I'd be surprised if he didn't. He must have saw the Crypt Breaker, because I would have pulled it to the front and be like, what is going on here?
Yeah. Yep.
So Steve's going to go ahead and shuffle his deck up, and then we're going to resolve this Thoughtseize as Joe is writing down Steve's hand. They're going to exchange some information, if you will.
Both players are going to have perfect information after this Thoughtseize resolves.
Yep.
And so it'll be really interesting to see how this game plays out.
We actually had to pay some cost for these instead of Gitaxian probing each other into oblivion.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so...
That's a Hydroblast, I think, is what that is.
Oh, yeah, I think you're right.
Hydroblast, 3 lands for Joe, a Hymn to Torak, and a Culligan's Command is still in. I wonder if he just doesn't have enough to cut and leaves one in.
What's the 4th card? Him?
There's a Hymn to Torak there, yes.
So...
That is a master set.
Probably taking him here? Because you want to make sure you keep all these pieces?
Yeah, so Steve's going to separate out the cards, the lands up there.
And Hydroblast really only hits, like, Faithless Looting... Faithless Looting?
Faithless Looting.
That's all it hits out of the deck, right?
Yeah. Yep. But I think it's pretty good. Actually, you and I did commentary on one of Joe's matches a while back, and he brought in Hydroblast at an odd time as well, and he hit a Culligan's Command,
definitely.
Remember that?
Yeah.
And we were like,
wow,
this
is gas.
That's just next level.
Like, I didn't even think about it.
Yep. So Steve going to take the Hymn. I think that's probably certainly the right choice here. Needs to keep both of his combo pieces, which he has both in hand, so...
Well, okay, and he gets to play a land this turn. He gets Entomb, play a 3rd land next turn. Then he can Cabal Therapy next turn and Reanimate.
And clear the way for the Reanimate.
So, like, seems like a pretty good line here.
Yeah, I think he's probably just going to wait a turn on this Therapy.
Yeah, shouldn't cast it this turn. I think he wants to Entomb on it and stuff. Drawing a Snapcaster Mage would probably be best possible for Joe.
Yeah.
Because he could snap Surgical.
Yeah, and at this point, I don't even know if I would Entomb on end step if I'm Steve. He gets to untap of the 3rd land, so he can do everything all at one time. All right, gonna go ahead.
Well, the problem is I think you want a Cabal before you try to Reanimate.
Okay, that makes sense.
Probably would name Force of Will.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's almost certainly the name.
Because he does have the Hydroblast, but that's the only other blue card.
Yes. All right, let's see what Steve's going to go get. He's kind of mulling some things over. He brought the Iona up to the front for a second there.
He could get... I think
I love Grave Titan in this spot.
I think just drawing 7 is your best bet. For sure.
Gristlebrand's almost always the first target that you go get,
yeah.
Because it kind of just opens you up to other things. Now, Grave Titan's really good against Diabolic Edict.
Yeah. It definitely will limit some of Joe's outs. It's an ETB trigger, though, so like Joe will have a window to edict him.
That's fair. All right, so he found a Snapcaster Mage.
Wow.
Unreal.
Really good rip.
All right. I think he's got to do it now. Yeah, that was a really good draw.
Yeah.
Are we banning Phyrexian Mana anytime soon? I don't want to start this at 9:30 in the morning, but
It's too early.
I'm so annoyed, though, with Phyrexian mana. All right, we're going to go for it. That's your draw step.
Yep, that was a really good draw. So, not getting Gristlebrand here gives him, I think, still lines the victory.
Yes, he's left multiple, many Gristlebrands in hand. So
We see on Iona here. Man, what a top deck.
Yeah, that was pretty good. So let's see what we get. I'm just kind of looking through Steve's deck as well as Joe is and seeing what's still left over here. Obviously, the Gristlebrands are left.
We do have, so next turn, Steve can flashback the looting.
Sure.
So that's something at least. He's not out of this.
Yeah, there's a Faithless Looting still in the bin there. But man, that's a backbreaking rip right there.
Really backbreaking.
And Joe still has his Hydroblast, excuse me. So,
Yeah.
so Steve's in a lot of trouble at this point. I think.
I mean, I think he wants to cast Cabal Therapy this turn.
Yeah, he's got to take it, right?
Name Hydroblast.
Yeah, he has to take the Hydroblast, I think, at this point.
Because he needs to flashback the looting and at least get the Iona into his graveyard.
Yeah, it is not the best here. All right, let's see what Steve comes up to. I'm just going to go ahead and pass. All right, well, Joe draws a blank there. Just a land, I believe. So Steve has a little bit of time. We shall see. Yeah, Steve just stuck with these two cards, Iona and a Cabal Therapy. You can go ahead and fetch here.
Just a minor thin here. There's no real reason to fetch. It's not saving life total with a shock or anything like that.
Yeah.
Doesn't have any end step effects.
All right. Yeah, this is a matchup I didn't know how it would go. Most of these matchups that get the combo decks, especially Reanimator, just depends on how many sideboard cards you're bringing in. Joe's certainly well equipped. Well equipped.
Absolutely. Joe's deck decision, right on spot with what we thought he would be doing.
There's a Gristlebrand. That's not what we want. Not what we want. I wonder if Steve forgot about the
it's possible.
Hydroblast.
Not something I would expect Steve to forget, but I mean it is pretty early here.
It is. It sure is. So the Hydroblast again, just proving to be very good for Joe.
Yeah, I mean Joe knows Legacy and he knows how these games are going to play out.
Yep.
For sure.
So Steve looking for there's a Dark Ritual. That doesn't really do anything. Steve, the window's starting to close here on Steve, I think.
Yeah, once another big threat comes into play, or if Steve gets sub 7 life, it's a little rough.
Yeah. All right.
One of the problems with K-Command in this spot is there's really no good second mode.
Correct, yeah.
You can't target anything in the graveyard, so you can't choose that mode.
Yeah, and discarding is abysmal.
And discarding is not where you want to be.
Let's see. I can't really make out Joe's hand very well, but I don't think it's very good at this point in the game.
Yeah, I don't think he's got many threats.
This is why Deathrite Shaman was so good. You just stuck it very early, and then your opponent was kind of just at your mercy. And if they didn't have things in the bin, you just drained them and killed them. So I'm so glad to see that card gone. Now, I think that's Animate Dead, that artwork that Steve has there.
Okay.
It's another new one.
Notable that he could, if this Snapcaster Mage were to die, he could animate that, right?
Yeah, I had someone animate
And then entomb again?
Yeah, I had someone animate a Gurmag Angler against me one time from my bin, and I was like, oh, well, that was not what I was expecting at all. All right, so Steve can lead with Cabal Therapy here. I assume it's going to be named a Force of Will here. We'll see what he names.
He's targeting himself.
Okay.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense. He's going to name
Gristlebrand. Cool.
Yep.
And he has Animate Dead, so are we just going to go for it?
Is a ritual as well?
Yep. Yep, no reason to ritual, I don't think, here. So, yeah, we're going to go for the Animate Dead. And Joe, that looks like he has it covered. Has a Force. And he's going to cast Force at Will. The often not the real mode of Force at Will.
No, it's not usually seen, yeah.
So Joe going to fetch out a basic.
I think Steve just making sure he has 5 lands.
Yep. All right, Steve gets Force of Willed. Again, though, we're in the spot where Joe's hand is just kind of nonsense at this point. I think he just has a Culligan's Command and not a lot going on. If Steve finds another way to fire the cannon, we could be getting places.
Yeah, he did kind of like turn on the Culligan's Command because now the discard is not as hurtful since there is already a target in the graveyard.
Like a brainstorm pickup from Joe here. He's gonna go ahead and ponder. Boy.
So I think it was definitely a threat. I think it was either an Edict or an Angler.
Yeah.
But it was 2 lands.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm going all in on whatever I'm drawing for the next 3 turns.
Yeah. Do we have time to do this? Are the 2 lands? Is the threat good enough? I think it was a Gurmag Angler. Is the threat good enough to draw 2 lands for the next 2 turns and give Steve a window of 2 turns?
Right. He does have a Brainstorm, so he could see 1 more card deep. But because of the hard cast Force of Will, he doesn't have fetch lands to really shuffle away any cards.
Now, if it is Gurmag Angler, he has a window to play it. He gets to put Steve to 8, and then he can kill him next turn with the Culligan's Command.
Yeah.
But are we giving him a turn? Is that something we're interested in? Or is a random
and if he gets out of it, then...
Looks like Joe's going to stick with the threat here. He's doing a lot of thinking. It's a tough decision.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and take it. It is a Gurmag Angler. I'm going to put Steve down to 8. I think he is. And Joe just kind of making sure he's doing this the best way possible. So you're going to go ahead and delve. Looks like 5 cards. Pay a pair here. And I like this from Joe. He's leaving himself a Brainstorm available. And he's also leaving like Flusterstorm or something like that available.
If that final card there is.
All right, let's see what Steve's got.
Steve could go to 1, but then 1 blocker is not doing it.
Yeah, and he knows about the Culligan's Command in hand still as well.
True. Yep.
All right, so Steve extends the hand. Joe Bernal going to win round number 1 here over Steve Locke. So, yeah, man, that was a crazy game. I'm not sure. I think that's how I thought it was going to go. Reanimator deck basically has to win game 1, in my opinion, and then sneak a second or third game out.
Yep.
Because there's so many cards. You saw Joe Surgical, Snap Surgical.
Yep.
He had the Hydroblast. He had Forces of Will. It's a lot to fight through. So, well, at any rate, congrats to Joe for winning round number 1.
Yeah, round 1 of the 5 rounds of Swiss.
Yeah.